Well, having a quorum, then I will call to order the meeting of the Metropolitan Council Transportation Committee for Monday, November 23rd. If there are no changes to the agenda, we can move ahead with the agenda being approved. Did anyone have any changes? All right, seeing none, the agenda is approved. Next, we'll move on to approval of the minutes. It's the minutes from the November 9th, 2020 meeting. Did anyone have any changes or additions to the minutes? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Sterner, approve the minutes. Motion.
Moved by Sterner. Is there a second?
Second by Gonzalez.
Second by Gonzalez. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, Becky, could you call the roll, please?
Chambliss. Cummings.
Aye.
Ferguson.
Aye.
Fredson.
Aye.
Gonzalez.
Aye.
Sterner.
Aye.
Zirin.
Aye.
Barber.
Aye. With that, the minutes are approved. Next, we're on to our tab report. We have Mr. Dugan here today. You're on mute, sorry.
Yes, thank you. I'm getting so used to everybody be on mute. We don't want to hear the dog in the background. So it was on mute. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and of course the committee members. Good to see you all. General Manager Koistra, Director Thompson, and Becky, who runs everything behind the scenes. And I see Chief Frizzell is on as well. Welcome. Not that I get to welcome you, Chief, but everyone should know I have some certain law enforcement contacts, and Chief Frizzell is well regarded in those circles. So congratulations, sir. The first priority, I'm going to go over a couple things that happened at the TAB meeting. First of all, the MPCA report. They are using $170,000 from the Volkswagen settlement to add 22 level 2 charging stations. And the background on this, because it may be something that your not your membership, but your customers, your voters may bring up to you. It is forecasted 25% of vehicles will be available electrically by 2025. And most electric vehicle drivers do what is called a top up, meaning if they have 100 miles to their vehicle, they typically do not let them get to let's say down 90 miles. They top up at every time that they can, every time that they park. So that's why charging stations are important, as opposed to a gasoline or a powered vehicle, which may go down to a quarter of a tank or less. The difference is a level 1 is 120 volts, and it takes 17 to 25 hours to charge for 100 miles. So the ratio is what they call range per hour is 4. So 25 hours times 4 miles per hour, if you will, 4 miles of charging equals the 100 miles. Level 2 refers to 240 volts, much like you would see with your dryer in your home. That charges in 4 to 5 hours. And so obviously it gets 25 range miles per hour. And in level 1, the big difference is in level 1, it can a level 1 charging station can charge 1 vehicle per day. A level 2 can charge 3 to 4 per day. And also level 2 has the enhanced capacity for mobile application and networking, meaning that a driver could could use a mobile app on their phone, not while driving, of course, to identify where the closest station is, and they can be repaired from afar. Okay, the report from MnDOT, and for those of you who know former Deputy Commissioner Scott Peterson, he's retiring to be replaced by Tim Collins. I will do the MAC report at the end because it's a little bit longer. On December 9th, you will have a full report on the team from Metro Transit under General Manager Koistra who will be talking about arterial BRT. The ABRT study is an outreach by Metro Transit on the potential 11 arterial BRT routes, and transit will get them down to 10 and then prioritize in tiers. And again, that will be before the full council on December 9th. In the regional solicitation, great progress was made in the November session. The December session is where the final votes are taken on the different projects. From a total of 6 funding scenarios, TAB got down to 2 and then decided on 1 last week. The 2 were the historic model, which you're all familiar with, and the second was what is called a hybrid 1B as in boy. And that has the advantage that it was selected because it funds a project in all counties, it has modal balance, and it funds all of the pedestrian safe route to school projects, which is a priority of the council and of course of TAB. And a second item, Metro Transit returned $4.5 million from a project several years ago, I believe 2016. Director Thompson I'm sure can correct me. And it is being returned. It was out in the Woodbury area, and TAB made the decision not to involve it in the regional solicitation, but wait until after to determine what to do with it. And MnDOT, through its representative, Chief Engineer, Metro Chief Engineer Barnes, cautioned TAB on relying on MnDOT for funding the larger strategic capacity projects. He said MnDOT, as of this time, has only 10, or maybe not as of this time, but projects only $10 million per year in ability to fund those projects. And for the MAC report, the MAC has some terrific, again, for your constituents, maybe of value. MSP was named the best airport in America for the 4th consecutive year in its 25 to $40 million passenger class. These rankings are done by the Airports Council International, and they're carried out, the surveys are carried out in over 91 countries, which are members of the Airports Council International. The same council also gave its very coveted General's Award, Director General's Award for service quality and customer satisfaction to MSP, one of only 7 airports in the world to get that. Quite an accomplishment for us, for those of us in Minnesota. Very proud to be here. In regard to the MAC, they've also initiated COVID testing in the blue ramp. So the parking area, blue ramp, level 2, it is free to all Minnesotans. You just drive up and get it done. It is set at a capacity of 1,000 people per day. The first day they did 1,500. Total flights are down 68%. TSA predicts 6.9 million folks will use the airport during Thanksgiving. Typically, it's 12 to 15 million. And last but not least, there is a parking benefit for all of us, who go to choose it, of $7 off for parking in the ramp if you pre-book, either staying 7 days or over the holidays. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I will be here for any questions.
Thank you, Peter. Are there any questions from council members?
I see
All
Nick,
right.
I see Nick Thompson is on. It means I made a mistake. What did I?
No.
He just knows that the next thing on the agenda is him. So thank you, Peter. So
Happy
then
Thanksgiving, everyone. Happy Thanksgiving.
to you as well, Peter. We're on to MTS Director Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. Today, the Governor's Blue Ribbon Committee met again. The purpose of today's agenda was to review their draft report and make changes, which is really the reason they were formed, is to make several recommendations to the governor about the status of the MPO, whether officials of the council should be elected or appointed, and transit governance in the region. So they spent the entire committee today reviewing the draft and making changes. They will give input over the next week into changes on that, and then it'll be revised one more time and sent out as a final draft a week from this Friday. and they meet one more time on December 7th. So they are essentially wrapping up their work, and so it's probably a good report that will come before council or this committee in the short term, but they've tried to tackle a lot, and they're near the end. So it's good news there. The other committee meeting that met today was the Legislative Committee on Metropolitan Government. Today they had their hearing on what they usually have one hearing a year as they meet before you adopt the council budget. So they had 3 items on the agenda: Met council budget, administrative citations, and the red line transition that we're making. The red line is on schedule to switch from our MTS division to Metro Transit on December 5th. And so the committee had asked for some information about that change. Overall, there was no actions taken by this legislative committee today. In terms of a COVID update, as after several weeks of no positive tests, last time before this committee I reported we had recently had a week with 4 positive tests. This past week, we've had 6 positive tests among our contracted workers, drivers or staff mechanics or dispatchers. To date, we've had 75 positive tests among this workforce that is over 1,500 employees. 62 have returned to work so far. Those that have not returned to work are really tied to the past few weeks that have tested positive. So hopefully things will turn out well for them and they will return to work. Because of the increase in positive rates in Minnesota and the region, we're expanding our testing of contracted employees so that we can try to find some of the ones that are asymptomatic. And so we're aggressively expanding that program, as is happening in the council too. We're trying to mirror the expansion of testing that is happening for the council with our contracted transit staff. Metro ridership is still about where we are, about 50% of normal, though we are expecting in the past week and in the next few weeks to have a little bit of decline in ridership with the holidays and this rapid expansion of COVID in the community. We know this customer base, when that has happened in the past, they've really reduced their ridership. So we'll continue to watch that. But we also are seeing continued strong demand for healthcare essential workers on Metro Mobility. Last week was the highest number of trips we had, over 1,000 or 7,000 trips for healthcare workers. And that represents 20% of the ridership on Metro Mobility right now. And so it's been an essential service for these healthcare workers to get them to their care facilities, and why we can continue to provide that service. And with that, it concludes my report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Director Thompson. Other questions? Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I have a couple questions. One is regarding the blue line or the blue ribbon commission. I would kind of want to know what was the temperature of the meeting? Was it kind of business as usual? And regarding the I know some of the questions come up each time there's a review, maybe whether or not council members should be elected or appointed. Anything surprising or trends regarding the last item?
Sure. Madam Chair, Councilmember, they kind of summarized their report as going to be evolutionary, not revolutionary. And they've all, I think, unanimously said that they do not believe council members should be elected. So they're going to recommend, I believe, that it continues to be appointed. There are going to be recommendations around the appointing committees that will very similar be modeled after what happened in this last round, but maybe stronger recommendations about elected officials and the governor accepting the slate of those that, and some transparency, some good governance actions, but I think there's general support there. But they were very clear they don't think they should be elected council members. And I'd say the tone is, as I mentioned, the recommendations that will come out of this will be evolutionary in terms of what should be making better governance and reforms, but they think a lot of what's happening is working well at this point.
Thank you for that. Additionally, if I may, Chair.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that I was downtown this morning and was able to see the new electronic signs are up along Marquette Avenue and showing that they're under construction. So it's nice to see that that process is actually in place and that, we'll have that new system running. When is that to be ready to be on board alive?
Madam Chair, I think that one would be General Manager Koister's answer to be able to give a better update than me on that one.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Chambliss, I don't have the date. I know that Bruce Howard is presenting later on the mobile app, and I think he's on now. He may have that date of when they'll be live. So I'm passing it on. I apologize. Both you and Bruce, I guess.
No problem. I mean, if you want to give a report next time, that's fine.
We can get back to you. I apologize for not having that date.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments for Director Thompson? All right. Thank you. So moving on to General Manager Koister.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Earlier today, the Metropolitan Council presented at the Legislative Commission on Metropolitan Governance. We walked through the proposed 2021 budget, and I provided a brief update on transit security and the administrative citations for fare evasion proposal. Shared with them that while key indicators of crime and other problematic behavior are lower than pre-pandemic, less checks for safety, fewer calls for service, fewer Part 1 crimes, fewer operator results. We also made clear that we should not view that as a trend, given that our ridership is down over 60% during the pandemic, actually near 65%. I also updated them on the status of security improvements we made in recent months. That includes installing real-time cameras on light rail vehicles. Last report is that we have 60 of the 90 light rail vehicles with cameras installed, and we're hopeful that we can finish the real-time camera installation by sometime in January. Also mentioned the body-worn camera implementation. Our officers are about 10 weeks into using body-worn cameras, and that together real-time cameras and body-worn cameras have been instrumental in supporting our police department's work, including the identification of suspects, the finding of weapons, the seeing issues of danger that may be occurring on our rolling stock, and particularly on our rail cars. Given that safety is one of our riders' highest priorities, we're eager to continue our efforts to secure administrative citation authority, and talked a little bit about what that bill would do. And we believe this administrative citation authority will be a significant tool in our efforts to increase presence on our system, among other attributes, such as being helpful to people who are using our system, and really just kind of bringing and providing a more regulated presence and a presence of an indication of safety on our system. In terms of the COVID update, the number, I'm sorry to report that the number of COVID cases has gone up significantly. We have 230 total as of this weekend. Since my last report on November 9th, 2 weeks ago, we've added 65 cases. This is from 11/9 to 11/22, from November 9 to November 22. And to put those 65 cases in context, prior to November, October was our highest month of cases with 53 total for the whole month. Before October, August was our highest month with 27 cases. So we're experiencing what the state's experiencing, what the region's experiencing, and what our cities are experiencing, and certainly have significant concerns about that. Ridership remains consistently down for the week of November 9 to November 15th. As a system, the ridership was down about 65%, bus down 65%, Blue Line down 69%, Green Line down 65%, and I believe that commuter rail is still down about 95%. With the governor's new orders last week and with cases increasing both within Metro Transit and across the region, we're continuing to monitor and respond to ensure that we're doing our part to reduce the spread of the virus. Brian Funk is here today to answer any questions you might have. Brian is the Deputy Chief Operations Officer for Austin Metro Transit Operations and works as the Incident Command Operations Chief as we address issues of COVID-related incidents. So if you have questions, he's here he can be available to you to answer those questions. Later in today's meeting, Bruce Howard and Chief Frizzell will provide an information item on the latest efforts to improve mask compliance among the riders. And then finally, I wanted to mention the upcoming December pick. Minor schedule and route changes will go into effect Saturday, December 5th. Bus and rail service levels will remain about 15% below where they were pre-pandemic. Metro Transit provided nearly 2.5 million rides in October, which is again about 65% less than the same month last year. The next round of scheduled service changes will take effect on Saturday, March 13th, 2021. So December pick is coming soon. With that, I'll take any questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, General Manager. Are there any questions from council members? Councilmember Cummings.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple questions. On the cameras that are going on the light rail vehicles, how are you allocating them currently? Is it half on blue, half on green, or how are you deciding how many to put on which line?
I'm looking to see if Vince is on. I don't believe he is, but I'll just say I think we're just trying to get them installed on the vehicles, and I think the uses of those cars can the uses of those vehicles can move from line to line. So I don't know that allocating them per line makes a large difference. But again, we have 60 of 90 in. We're hope to have the rest in hopefully by the end of the year or into January a little bit. We're a little bit delayed on that because of all the work that had to be done for COVID, the manufacturing of the barriers that we put in to allow for front door boarding. So there's been a lot going on with our maintenance staff who are doing this work, and I know that we're anxious to get in, but I'm told that a lot of the COVID work is now behind us, and they're making a lot of headway on getting the rest of them in.
Councilmember Cummings.
Thank you. Thank you. That's good to hear. And obviously, everybody's schedule on everything is not ideal. We had to kind of pivot, and congratulations to staff for doing all that they're doing, and then moving back. It wasn't an implication that more should have been done sooner or faster. So, but thanks for that update. My other question is about compliance with masks, and I know it's different for drivers, but I'm just wondering, what is your sense? Maybe Mr. Funk has thoughts on this as far as, that's a question that I have gotten often from constituents in my district is, well, what about the drivers? So I'm just wondering, how is that going? I know there are safety considerations that come first and foremost, but I'm just wondering what you're finding as far as the experience of our operators also wearing masks.
I'll mention before turning it over to Brian that it's kind of odd because our drivers say, "What about the riders?" and so we just want them all to be wearing masks. Right. That's really what it comes down to. But we've done some surveys of our operators and mask compliance, and we're doing surveys of riders. And I'll let Brian talk a little bit speak specifically to the operator compliance, and he also probably has the data on the surveys of riders, both on our rail system and in our bus system. We've looked at both.
Yep. So, Madam Chair, Councilmember Cummings, again, Brian Funk, Deputy Chief Operating Officer. Thanks for having me today. Councilmember Cummings, to answer your question, we have been doing observations in the field for our operators because we know that it's easy to tell other people to do things. We need to demonstrate that behavior ourselves, and our operators are doing a really good job of compliance. Our numbers show, close to 90% compliance just straight off the top, wearing a mask. And then when you factor in, we do not require them to wear a mask if there's nobody else on board. For example, at the end of the line, if their day is wrapping up and they're just going back to the garage, they don't have to keep their mask on any longer. Also within that, as you mentioned, the executive order allows for a little bit of flexibility for safety considerations. And so one of the things that we also track includes whether or not the employee was wearing glasses. Eyeglasses tend to be one of those tricky things that some people have found the perfect trick to keep them from fogging up. Other people, it works one day, but not the other. And so we did an evaluation back earlier this summer, and the executive order also allows for some industry-specific allowances for what might constitute an enclosed workspace. And so the plexiglass partitions that we have can function in that manner. For us, that's sort of the last resort. We've asked our operators to wear a mask as much as possible. The new CDC guidance, reiterates that there's a benefit for both the wearer as well as the people around you. We also have made face shields, plastic face shields available, so that if there needs to be contact outside of that compartment, or the mask doesn't work, people have an alternative. And then that last resort is those protective shields. And then, yeah, as it relates to customers, I know that the chief and Director Howard will do a little presentation later, but we have been seeing that 75 to 80% compliance for customers. We certainly want to aim for that 95 to 100%, recognizing there are some people with exceptions, but we know there's work to do.
Madam Chair, I just want to mention that we have held out 95% as our goal. That's a figure that Governor Walz spoke to, and to say for masks to be most effective, the ideal is to get 95% compliance. So we're putting that in front of us as an objective to get to with our work on improving mask compliance, both with riders and operators.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. Additional questions or comments from council members? Councilmember Sterner.
Yes, thank you, Chair Barber. I just had a question regarding the filtration system on the bus. Like, do those get changed out regularly on it? Because there's some of the air circulation from to the drivers and backwards, and the client customers to the driver. I'm just wondering how effectively we change the filter system on the buses.
Brian?
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead, Brian.
So, Councilmember Sterner, I'll do a little more research. I don't have the preventative maintenance schedule off the top of my head. I know that we have investigated with the vehicle manufacturers and the provider of those HVAC systems what levels of filtration we're able to provide, assuring that we're engaging in the best practices to make sure that we have maximum air turnover. We also have invested in a pilot program to evaluate a hydrogen peroxide dispensing unit that actively disinfects the air circulating through the vehicle. And so that level is safe based on the OSHA levels for continuous exposure. Right now, we started field testing that last month, and we're continuing to gain some experience. So, but I'll follow up on the specific filtration changing question.
All right, thank you very much.
Right. Any additional questions? All right. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Wes. So now we can move on to business. Before we move on business, I just want to make a quick comment on something. So when we get down to business item number 2020-295, I just was notified that there's an issue with an error in the business item. So we're going to have to table that to move it out. So just want to give you a heads up so you're aware when we get to that one. So first order of business is approval of the items on consent. I entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Chambliss makes a motion to approve.
Okay. Moved by Chambliss, second by Cummings. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, Becky, could you call the roll, please?
Chambliss.
Aye.
Cummings.
Aye.
Ferguson.
Aye.
Fredson.
Aye.
Gonzalez.
Aye.
Sterner.
Aye.
Zirin.
Aye.
Barber.
Aye. With that, the motion carries. Next, we're on to business item number 2020-284, which is authorization of public hearing for Orange Line Connecting Bus Study Plan. And I'm not sure who's presenting. Cindy? Ms. Cindy Harper, you're on mute. Cindy, we still can't hear you.
Okay.
Okay,
Is
there you
that
go.
better?
Yes.
Good afternoon. Chair Barber and members of the committee. My name is Cindy Harper, and I am the manager of route planning for Metro Transit Service Development Division. A study is yet another example of a project that has been impacted by the pandemic. We launched this project, everything was put on pause.
Cindy, I'm going to stop you for a quick second.
So we are now relaunching the project.
Can you hear me? You're really choppy. Sometimes it helps if you turn off the video. We can try that?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Is that any better?
No, it's still pretty
Is that any
choppy.
better?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Let's see what I can get through, and then maybe Adam might be able to have to, but too. So as I mentioned, this is, we started originally last. We were at the point of ready to bring out ready to relaunch that project.
Chair, I don't think it's
so
working.
Today I have on the project.
Cindy, we're still having a hard time hearing you. So, Adam, do you want to step in to start?
Sure. This is Adam Harrington. Can you hear me okay?
Maybe she can call in on the phone too.
Yeah.
Chair Barber.
Yeah, that can work. Can you hear me okay, Chair?
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Well, why don't I move us through the Orange Line Connecting Bus Study. It's a project that's been underway for the last year or so, and we've been developing the Connecting Bus Plan over that time with some input from the public and from our operators, and developing the network, which is almost ready. But one of the things we need to do is get some public feedback on that network. And of course, the lead time for developing the plan as required for a public hearing pushes us a little bit earlier than before we have the plan ready to present. And so what we're presenting today is to, version of this if I can, is to recommend the approval of public hearing dates and locations, which are virtual meetings in January and February that you'll see on the business item. And so what I'd like to show, if I can, for a second here, and I'm going to try and pull. Okay. Can you see this presentation on the screen?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so here's some of the background. of the project, you're familiar with the Orange Line, 12 stations, 17 miles, and you will have heard the progress that's been made on the construction of several of the stations along the alignment, and our anticipation to begin operating this service as early as late 2021. We're targeting December at this point. And so part of this is to develop the connecting bus plan. And this is anchored around the Route 535 service, which is operating today, and a number of the connecting bus routes in the corridor. So as you'll see here, many of the Orange Line riders will connect to the Orange Line with existing routes. And so we want to make sure that they meet the customer's needs in the corridor. So our project goals are to link customers, residents, jobs, and services, grow our ridership, simplify the network, and expand mobility and connectivity as we can. This will be complementing existing commuter express service in the corridor as well. Here's the project timeline I was referring to. So we began this in late 2019, doing the existing conditions and just beginning the stakeholder community engagement, and have been developing the plan and working on a plan revision this last summer, and looking towards plan approval late this year and implementing in late 2021. But we were sidelined by some of the challenges with COVID this year. So now we're relaunching the project, again, focusing on the transit ridership and demand. And as we know, and we've talked about before, the changes in the transit ridership and demand and how that changes the patterns of service, as well as the budget and resources that we have available to us. Some of these routes are suspended. As I mentioned in previous presentation, we're operating at approximately an 80% level of our operating budget for bus. And so that means that about 55 bus routes are currently suspended. They're largely commuter express, given the constraints in availability of office workers in downtown Minneapolis and St. Paul who can work remotely. So that has changed some of the demand patterns that we've seen. So in relaunching the project, part of what we've done is you've really focused in the number of routes that we're evaluating, and you'll see them here. These are the existing routes in the project and how we look at those connections to the 35W corridor.
Hey, Adam, Cindy is back on. She was able to dial back in. We can see if her audio is cooperating better this time, if you want to.
Yeah, go for it, Cindy.
Go ahead, Cindy. Oh.
He's on mute.
Yeah, you're still on mute now. All right, back to you, Adam. We're being nimble today.
Okay, Cindy,
Okay.
I'm watching. There you are. Okay.
There
Take
I
it
am.
away.
Okay. So yes, as Adam was talking about now, we're ready to relaunch our process. And so here's how we are relaunching the project. Certainly narrowing the scope of our project to focus more on, to be a tighter focus, really talking about just the routes that are, that need to be directly involved because of they currently are a Route 535 local branch, or other routes that are directly related to the Orange Line. Initially, we had a little bit wider scope here. So now we're down to about 11 or 12 routes, as you can see on the map to the right. We reviewed the project goals and realized that we think that with what we've learned through in the last year, our initial goals still meet the needs and objectives that are out there today, even with everything that's happened in 2020. We're also revisiting our engagement feedback and strategies. Last August, the Listening and Learning Through Crisis group did a lot of surveying work, and I know that this committee just got have seen the results of their research. And really, what we learned was that the priorities we had heard in that work really matched what we had heard last fall through our own engagement and outreach process. And so we believe that really what we learned in our engagement last fall still holds and still able to move forward. Obviously, we learned a lot from the listening and learning through crisis engagement in terms of strategies. Clearly, more interest on online. And also currently we have a lot of interested parties who are not writing with us but are still interested in what's going on. We also have some suspended services in the study area, so we'll need to factor that in. And in order to really account for all these variables, we're going to have 3 different scenarios that we focus on in our concept plan. The basic scenario, which is the same amount of resources that we have on the street today. And then also a medium scenario, which is a little bit larger than today. It reflects this amount of resources that we had in the area this time last year. And then a third scenario that'll be a true growth scenario. So here's our revised project timeline. We're at the point where we are just putting the finishing touches on the initial concept plan and then launching our outreach and engagement in January and February. It's a good thing that we had about 6 months worth of extra time in our schedule because we certainly have used it. Now we're on schedule for June 2021 final approval from the council, and then actually implementation in late 2021. And then finally, we are, as I mentioned, we're currently working on the concept plan, which we will be bringing back to Transportation Committee in January. So for our perspective, January and February are going to be quite busy for us. We will be doing targeted outreach to not only our riders, but also community-based organizations, both online and non-computer-based techniques certainly being used for that. We'll be doing a direct mailing. We'll be out following social distance protocols, talking with customers at some of the more popular boarding locations, doing internal engagement with both Metro Transit operators, and there's also a fair number of routes in this study area are operated under contract to MTS, and so we'll be engaging with them as well. And then our external outreach, which includes the cities that are in the corridor. We'll meet with them in early January, as well as Normandale Community College, neighborhood associations, really piggybacking on a lot of the Orange Line newsletter and social media, really using a lot of the same plans that we used for Network Next and for listening and learning through crisis as a model and applying what we've learned. We will look to have 2 community meetings and 1 public hearing, and the format for all 3 is exactly the same. The difference is just that the meeting on Wednesday, February 10th would have the legal designation, but we intend to have the format and the information and everything be exactly the same between the 3. And then on the last slide is just the business item, the proposed action for the Metropolitan Council to authorize a public hearing on proposed service changes outlined in the Orange Line Connecting Bus Study concept plan. And I'd be happy to take any questions, and I apologize for the technical difficulties.
No problem, Cindy. Thank you so much. Any questions from council members? Councilmember Cummings.
Thank you, Chair. It's really more of a comment. I'm so excited to see that this is picking up and restarting. It's such a critical route to join the robust transit system that we have. It's such an important route, and I know so many people have held their breath for many months waiting for the final funding to be in place so that this could proceed. So really appreciate all of the work that has been done on this. And I think the pause, while we like to see things continue to move forward, I think the pause, given so much change in our world today, really allows for a better product and to sort of reevaluate the goals and reevaluate the financial impact, because those are huge considerations. So again, I just thank all of the staff. Thank you, Cindy, Adam, everybody on the team who has worked on this. And I know that the communities that are in my district are really excited that this is picking up again. So thank you for all of your effort, and it will be interesting to watch this going forward. Thank you.
Madam
Thank
Chair
you.
and members of the community, thank you very much.
No problem. Any additional questions or comments from council members? All right, seeing and hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2020-284.
So moved. Cummings.
Moved by Cummings. Is there a second?
Fredson, I'll second.
Seconded by Fredson. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, Becky, could you call the roll, please?
Chambliss,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Ferguson,
Aye.
Fredson,
Aye.
Gonzalez,
Aye.
Sterner, Zirin,
Aye.
Barber.
Aye. With that, motion carries. Thank you, Cindy and Adam. On to next business item. It's business item 2020-316. It's Metro Orange Line amended MnDOT construction authorization, and we have Charles Carlson.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. As the presentation comes up, I'll give a brief update on where we're at with this project and agreement that was authorized in 2017, and then a recommended action to tune up this item. Next slide, please. So this item relates to the Metro Orange Line bus rapid transit corridor, so the 12-station, 17-mile corridor from downtown to Burnsville. As the committee knows, the project is fully funded and has been under construction. So we've been pleased to continue construction work ahead of opening the project next winter. Next slide. To get there, before the project was fully funded, the council had authorized a partial award of the agreement with MnDOT under Action 2017-65. And what this item did is authorized Orange Line construction to begin within a larger MnDOT-held construction contract. And the scope of the transit work within that contract includes a new 12th Street transit-only ramp in and out of downtown Minneapolis that's shown here with new red lanes going in and out of downtown that will open soon. Transit-related roadway and bridge costs elsewhere in the corridor, particularly at Lake Street where there's a central transit bridge, a station building that would connect up into that bridge, and then other designs and construction management services that MnDOT is providing within their contract on behalf of Metro Transit. So in 2017, the council authorized the local share of this work not to exceed $46.871 million, with the anticipation that upon full funding from the FTA, we would return to council and seek authorization for the full cost. Next slide. So since that item was awarded, we've been busy on the 35W corridor. So in addition to that new connection to downtown you saw on the previous slide, this slide shows the past, present, and future of the Lake Street area at the freeway level. So on the top left, the future station in a computer rendering from a couple years ago, really now is taking shape. You can't miss it on 35W if you're driving in the corridor or riding by, including on Lake Street. So a prominent station in that location, and of course a big improvement over the former bus stop shown on the bottom here. Next slide. Really a central piece of this is improving access to our service, and we really are delivering on that in this case. The past bus stop was up a set of stairs that wasn't always in the best condition. We're also working to remedy that significantly with an interior station as well as elevators to the station level. So We continue to make very good progress on this construction as it continues. Next slide. And here's another view of the Lake Street level. So the transit station and bridge constructed and in place, and then the bridge is constructed. The transit station continues to rise up. You know, all of this a big improvement over a pretty dark waiting area that had preceded. Connecting here to the Midtown Greenway, to buses and the future and fully funded Beeline BRT project as well. So really a significant destination in the Lake Street area, and just a few minutes from downtown Minneapolis, and in the peak up to 100 buses an hour serving the stations. We're very excited to continue the progress at this location. Next slide. So the business item before us today reflects the progress that we've made since the first quarter of 2017, when we had estimated cost and local only funding. So there's a few things that this item does. One, it aligns the authorization to the actual bid costs. So we're responsible for the actual bid costs with MnDOT. It reflects coordination between the Federal Highway Administration and the Federal Transit Administration over how a certain subset of federal funds would be handled. Then that would be as related to congestion mitigation, air quality funds. And then maybe most importantly, it authorized the full agreement cost expenditure. So with the federal share now in place, we'd be seeking for the council to authorize the remaining share of the project. And then finally, it authorizes a change order authority for the project for changes that may be necessary as project construction continues, not to exceed 5% of our costs. And although we're setting a cap at 5%, we're actually doing quite a bit better than that with a lot of the project constructed. We're so far under 1% in anticipated change orders. So construction's going very smoothly, and we feel like this will set a reasonable cap that won't require us to come back to the council before construction is complete. And then finally, full funding is available within the Orange Line project for this from state, county, and federal sources. So with that, Madam Chair, the recommended action is, or the proposed action is that the Metropolitan Council authorizes additional expenditure within Agreement 17I-009 with the Minnesota Department of Transportation, not to exceed $7,574,848 for a revised total. Authorization not to exceed $54,446,598. With that, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Sorry, I did it myself. Thank you, Charles. Is there any questions from council members?
All right.
All right. Seeing none, then I would entertain a motion to approve business item 2020-316.
Chambliss approves.
Moved by Chambliss. Is there a second?
Second by Gonzalez.
Second by Gonzalez. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, Becky, could you call the roll, please?
Chambliss.
Aye.
Cummings.
Aye.
Ferguson.
Aye.
Fredson.
Aye.
Gonzalez.
Aye.
Sterner. Zirin.
Aye.
Barber.
Aye. With that, the motion carries. All right, on to the next business item, which is the one that I had mentioned that we need to table, which I believe our next Transportation Committee meeting is December 14th. And so I would need a motion from a council member to table business item 2020-295 to the December 14th Transportation Committee.
Cummings moves to table.
Moved by Cummings. Is there a second?
Fredson will second.
Seconded by Fredson. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none. Becky, could you call the roll, please? Oh, sorry. All right, Councilmember Chambliss.
That's okay. Can you explain what the mistake is related to?
I would need.
Chair, this is Ed Petrie. I'm online.
Thank you.
Yes,
Go
thank
ahead,
you.
Ed.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, council members, I'm working right now with the counties on the final 2021 grant agreements for Blue, Green, and North Star. I have my final meetings with them the first week of December. And I believe there might be a slight adjustment. There's a base share and a non-annual share. There might be a slight adjustment between the blue line and the green line. So I would like to come back on December 14th because then I will know what the final grant agreement amounts will be for 2021.
Okay, thank you.
All right, is there any other discussion? All right, seeing none, Becky, now could you call the roll?
Chambliss,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Ferguson,
Aye.
Fredson,
Aye.
Gonzalez,
Aye.
Sterner, Zieren,
Aye.
Barber.
Aye. And with that, the motion carries and the item is tabled until December 14th.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. No problem. Thank you, Ed. On to business item 2020-310. It's amendment number 4 to intersection LLC contract for transit advertising sales. And I believe we have Bruce Howard's going to be.
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Chair and council members. Before I get to the business item, just to follow up to earlier question about the new signs on 2nd Avenue and Marquette Avenue in downtown Minneapolis, I did double check with staff, and those signs we expect to go live here in the next couple of weeks. So hopefully you'll be seeing those. I believe there's 36 new signs down there. We're really excited about them. They look great. So they should be live in the next couple of weeks. With that, Madam Chair, I will move on to business item 2020-310. As you introduced, the amendment number 4 to the intersection LLC contract. The proposed action before you has 2 parts. So the first is to authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute an amendment to the intersection contract based on the attached term sheet, and that continues to provide relief from the minimum annual guaranteed payments owed the council by intersection. And then the second part of this is to extend the term of the intersection contract to April 30th, 2023. So let me take just a couple minutes and provide a little background and context as to why we are requesting this action here tonight, and then I'll be happy to try and answer any questions. If you recall, Intersection is the vendor that sells the advertising space on Metro Transit assets, so bus sides, train wraps, station kiosks, interior cards, digital screens at our light rail stations. The original contract required Intersection to pay the council 65% of those advertising revenues or a minimum annual guarantee, whichever is greater. Also, you may recall in March of this year, Intersection approached Metro Transit and notified us that due to the pandemic, advertising spending was expected to drop considerably over the next several months as businesses closed and people stayed home. We had that long 51-day, I believe it was, stay-at-home order. And so Intersection then had far fewer revenues coming in. They do expect and did expect that their revenues would be down 40% in 2020. So really making it pretty impossible for them to make these minimum annual guaranteed payments. So in June, the council amended the intersection contract. I came before the transportation committee here, if you recall, and then on to the full council. We amended their contract so that from April through December of 2020, Intersection would only be responsible for paying Metro Transit 65% of the revenue it made selling advertising space. There would be no minimum guaranteed payments due the council. And as I stated, the revenues that Intersection expected for this year would be down about 40%, but they still would be bringing in about $3 million in revenue based on revenue share. So we don't have those final numbers, obviously, but that looks like where we're headed for the year end here. So also with that amendment in June, Madam Chair, if you recall, the parties agreed to meet in late 2020 to discuss reinstating a minimum annual guaranteed payment in 2021, depending upon what was happening in the economy. So we had that meeting with Intersection, and the conclusion is from an advertising spending perspective, the economy is really not expected to improve a whole lot until perhaps mid-2021. And of course, all you need to do is look around at what's happening here locally. I think probably everyone's familiar with City Pages, the 41-year-old alternative newspaper here, decided that they had to close down just because they were not able to generate enough advertising revenue. So the market here is still pretty soft. And so part one of the action before you then, as I said, is to recommend that we continue with a revenue share only arrangement for the rest of the contract. And again, this contract runs through April 2022, so it's not on a calendar year. As in June, when we came before you, we still believe that working with Intersection, our vendor, to maximize revenues is probably the best way to approach this, as opposed to trying to collect a minimum annual guarantee that in all likelihood would be very difficult for us to collect for a couple reasons. One, as I mentioned, just their revenues are not there. And then secondly, a piece of the contract also requires Metro Transit to make available a certain number of vehicles for Intersection to sell advertising on. And right now, we're at about 80% of pre-pandemic levels. So we have far fewer vehicles out on the street for Intersection to sell. So I will say that you know, we're continuing to try and find new revenue sources as well. A couple things I just mentioned. We're going to be putting advertising on C-Line buses and C-Line stations. We have not done that. We wanted to make sure that brand got established first. We are adding advertising panels to many of our shelters, so we have more advertising space available. So we're going to continue to work hard trying to raise ad revenues. So that addresses the first request of the business item, Madam Chair. The second part of this, to authorize the extension of the current contract of one more year to April 2023. The thinking here is that this contract, it does expire in 2022, and we would typically be competitively bidding this contract probably this coming summer or fall. But knowing that the potential bidders may still not feel real certain about the economy, and what we're hearing from around the country is that the bids that transit agencies are receiving right now include no minimum annual guarantees at all, we are thinking that it would make sense to wait one more year, which then would give our vendors a little more assurances when they send in their bids. And those bids hopefully would include some minimum annual guarantees. Now, I know you may be thinking, well, you know, what good are these minimum annual guarantees if when things get tough, we can't collect them? Just a quick word, and then I'll finish here, Madam Chair. Our minimum annual guarantees are really used to help us compare bids when the proposals come in. They're also used as kind of an insurance that our vendor is working hard for us, gives them something to shoot at, and also helps us budget. So they do have a purpose, but really not covering, you know, these major downturns like with the pandemic. So with that, Madam Chair, I will conclude and take any questions.
Thank you, Bruce. Are there any questions from council members? Councilmember Cummings.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's really more of a comment. I think this makes so much sense, and I think that this is through no fault of anyone at all. It's the trickle down. We don't have the businesses with the resources, and the company doesn't have the resources, and it really reflects. I think it's common sense, and I think it makes it shows that we are all in this together, and we share the pain, and hopefully we will come out of this. And I think taking the time to really sort of reevaluate, because to continue to, every 6 months or whatever, then reevaluate. This to me makes much more sense to look at it a little bit long-term going into 2022. So I appreciate your work on this.
Thank you.
All right, I'd say it. Well said, Councilmember Cummings. Are there any other additional questions or comments from council members?
Chair Barbara, I just have a quick question.
Go ahead, Councilmember Ferguson.
It makes sense to me to waive the minimum required revenue, but I guess I don't understand why at this point we would extend a contract, especially one that has no equity commitment, when we're trying to work to put equity commitments in contracts, and now we're going to commit to 3+ years of, or 2+ years, I guess, 2.5 years of guaranteed not having any opportunity to require this contract to have any equity equipment. Some of which could even be advertising, for example, for minority businesses or things like that, or trying to promote other equity activities around our region. So is there a reason why we could not wait to extend the contract until this time next year or even later?
Madam Chair, did you want me to answer that, or?
Yes, please. Either you, and if Wes has any comments.
Sure. I don't know if General Manager would like to start or has any comments first.
Madam Chair, I think I'll just let Bruce answer the question. We talked about this, and so my response would be what would be a reflection of the discussion that we had.
Yeah, Madam Chair, council members, I'm not quite sure I understand fully the question that Council Member Ferguson is asking, but again, the thought process that we had here was just that this, as I mentioned, contract would be typically competitively bid in either summer, fall of 2021, and right now what we're hearing from around the marketplace where other transit agencies are bidding their contracts is that they're not getting any minimum annual guarantees, and so we just thought it might make sense to extend it so that vendors had a little bit more certainty of what was going on in the economy. We might get some more better bids when those come in at that point, just because they're a little more certain about what is going to be happening a year out from now.
But it seems like you said the minimum guarantees don't really have any economic value to us, because if they're not going to be met, we're going to waive them anyways.
Well, Madam Chair, Madam Chair, council members, in this situation, they don't necessarily, because it is such an unusual time, and it's not something that's happening just locally here in our market. It's happening obviously across the country, and so for intersection to have to pay all of those guarantees across the country, would essentially put them out of business. If in normal times, what typically would happen is we would have in place these minimum annual guarantees in our marketplace here in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and if, say, something happened locally here to our market, then we would probably ask them to pay, and we have in the past asked them to pay a minimum annual guarantee, where they didn't have such a great year selling, or, they lost a general manager one time and that affected their sales. And so we were able to use the MAGs in that situation.
Madam Chair, this is Wes. I would just embellish a little bit on the same of what Bruce is saying. The judgment was made that we might get a more favorable contract waiting a little while through an extension. Certainly if the council prefers that we don't do that, that is something that we will absolutely accommodate. It's a judgment call. It was a judgment call about feeling that we could get perhaps better bids by postponing the bidding process. And as Bruce said, we've used the MAGs before to our advantage, but again, this is a judgment call, purely.
Councilmember Cummings.
Thank you. I'm wondering how many bids do you normally get under normal circumstances, which I realize we're not in, but how many bids might you expect to get on this particular issue?
Yeah, Madam Chair, council member, we would typically get somewhere in the range of, I would say, 3 to 6, with probably, I would say, maybe 3 serious contenders. We also have Typically some bidders that just, probably are not able to accommodate our size contract. In other words, they can't bring in national sales and that kind of thing. But that's one of the other reasons why, I think it's important for us to make sure we keep these vendors in business when we can, because it gives us more options when the contract is put out for bids. But essentially, we'd probably expect to get somewhere in that neighborhood of 3 to 6, I would say.
Thank you.
Okay. Additional questions? Go ahead, Councilmember Ferguson.
And just to be clear, I'm not suggesting we shouldn't waive the minimum. It's purely a question around whether we should extend the contract. It doesn't seem like we're getting anything in exchange for extending the contract. I mean, I understand from the vendor's perspective why it would make a ton of sense to extend it now, but I'm not sure what they gave us in return, because now they've got a contract in 2023 with no minimums. And they didn't give anything. They didn't make any commitments to do anything that they weren't already committed to doing. So I don't have a problem waiving the minimums. I just question whether or not we should be extending the contract under those terms for another year.
Yeah, Madam Chair and Councilmember Ferguson, I don't know if this would help or not, but I did talk with the vendor about, the possibility of extending the contract. They were, of course, interested in doing that. They want to work with us. But they also said they would be willing to sit down again and look at, bringing back in some minimum annual guarantees, say, end of next year, like we did this year, take a look at what's happening. So, we could do that. And we will do that if they do extend the contract, and they would probably be open to putting in some kind of a MAG at that point, if that helps at all.
Additional questions from council members?
Council Member Zarin here.
Councilmember Zarin.
Yep. If I may address Bruce. Bruce, Councilmember Ferguson did bring up a point. Why can't we give it 6 months? Why does it need to happen right now for that extension? And I think he deserves an answer for specifically addressed to that portion of his question.
Absolutely, Madam Chair, Council Member. I don't think there is any magic to doing it right now, other than that we were just bringing this forward as a business item. We certainly could wait and reassess this question, as General Manager Cloister said, at a later date, if you're interested in taking that approach.
Any additional questions from council members?
Yeah, I guess I would like to amend the motion to remove the extension and just have a straight motion on having the removal of the minimum guarantees.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor.
Seconds.
It's seconded by Zarin. Is there any other discussion? All right, seeing none. Becky, could you call the roll, please?
Chambliss.
Aye.
Cummings.
Aye.
Ferguson.
Aye.
Fredson.
Aye.
Gonzalez.
Aye.
Sterner.
Aye.
Zarin. Barber.
Aye. So with that, the motion carries. So I just have one final question. Bruce, when would you expect to be bringing that back to us?
Point of order.
Councilmember Zarin?
Did we just vote on the amendment, or did we vote on the resolution altogether? I think we voted on the amendment.
Okay. All right, then I need a motion to vote on the amended version of business item 2020-310.
So moved.
Moved by Ferguson. Is there a second?
Seconds.
I'm sorry, who was that?
Zarin. Zarin
Zarin,
second.
seconded by Zarin. Is there any other discussion? Councilmember Cummings.
Yeah, can you now state what we're actually voting on at this point?
We are voting. The proposed action is that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute an amendment to the intersection LLC contract based on the attached term sheet that provides to, or that continues to provide relief from the minimum annual guarantee MEG payments owed the council. Thank you for that, Molly, actually. Is there any other discussion? I have my question, Bruce, is when would you anticipate bringing that back to us about the contract?
Right. Yes, Madam Chair, council members, let me get together and talk a little bit with staff here, procurement, legal, others, and we'll probably get back to you with that, depending upon kind of what their and what that discussion is. Right now, as I said, the contract will go through April 2022. So we'd want to probably make a decision before, like I said, late summer, early fall, when we would typically be bidding that contract out. If we decided to extend it, then we wouldn't bid it. If we were going to bid it, then we would want to go ahead and do that probably in that time period, because it takes a few months to do that. Plus, if by chance we change vendors, it takes the vendors time to get their sales staff and things up and running. So that's probably the timeline I'm looking at.
All right, thank you very much. All right, any additional questions or discussion? Seeing none, Becky, could you call the roll?
Chambliss.
Aye.
Cummings.
Aye.
Ferguson.
Aye.
Fredson.
Aye.
Gonzalez.
Aye.
Sterner.
Aye.
Zirin.
Aye.
Barber.
Aye. With that, the amended business item is approved. Next, we're on to, and thank you, Bruce.
Thank you.
We're on to business item number 2020-311, Gold Line Real Estate Acquisition and Condemnation Authority, and we have Kristen Beckwith.
And Madam Chair, this is Charles Carlson. I will present for Chris Beckwith tonight. She's unavailable to present, but I'll do my best to fill in.
Go ahead, Charles.
Madam Chair and committee members, this item relates to the real estate acquisition along the Metro Gold Line project. So the Gold Line is the region's first dedicated guideway bus rapid transit project that we're planning between downtown St. Paul and Woodbury, roughly adjacent to I-94. So in this project, there are a number of parcels that would be impacted by project construction, about 160 overall. The vast majority of those acquisitions would be small temporary takings so that we could reconstruct a sidewalk and then tie the grade back in as it exists today, just as an example. But there are some larger acquisitions as well. So the scale of this project will require some property acquisition, and that's what this item relates to. So in addition to the base transit construction scope, there's also some local scope requests from project partners that we would be pursuing through cooperative agreements with those parties. So additional sidewalk segments, additional small reconstruction areas adjacent to our scope, for which we would also be acquiring the real property as needed in cooperation with our local partners. So this item relates to, as I said, to a few different aspects of real estate acquisition. One is initiating the purchase of property as needed, so making offers to property owners as we need to for easements and fee title acquisitions. Another piece relates to initiating condemnation if necessary to pursue and complete those purchases. And then finally related to settlement value. So to assist the negotiation process, authorization for settlement of real estate offers. based on the volume of parcels that we're estimating for the project and looking at existing council policy as well as past LRT project precedents, we have through this item recommended a authorization to the regional administrator for certain parcel values, and that would relate to for approval of expenditures for initial offers between 500,000 and 1 million instead of per current council policy. Met Council authorizing that as required that the regional administrator could pursue those acquisitions. And then secondly, to administrative settlements, where for parcel settlements between $250,000 and $1 million, the proposal is that the regional administrator could pursue those settlement values. So when we put these items together, it's really a streamlining of the acquisition process, and then finally a affirmation or a resolution supporting the project's public purpose under statute, so that if necessary, condemnation can be pursued, as well as these acquisitions overall. So when we put this handful of actions together, we have our proposed action, and that is that the council pass Resolution 2020-30, declaring a public purpose and authorizing council staff to commence acquisition for all temporary and permanent easements and fee acquisitions, the property necessary for the Metro Gold Line project, and associated locally requested scope. And then to authorize the regional administrator to approve expenditure at the appraised or settlement value up to 1 million for any parcel, and authorize the regional administrator to initiate condemnation proceedings on behalf of the council and local agency partners for parcels that cannot be acquired by direct purchase. With that, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Charles. Are there any questions from council members? Councilmember Cummings.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Carlson, have there been conversations with especially private property owners about acquiring their properties, or will this be new?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Councilmember Cummings, this action is really the start of that process. So the council's authorization to pursue property would really set up our basis to issue offers, and really that being the commencement of the acquisition process.
Thank you.
Additional questions from council members? Councilmember Fredson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering about the consistency with other projects, say Southwest or A-Line or C-Line, how this threshold would compare with those negotiated under those projects.
Yes, Madam Chair, Councilmember Fredson, there are a few differences between it. So in developing this item, we really used the baseline case of the existing Met Council policy, which is up to $500,000 per project or any particular parcel, and that's what we're suggesting to amend here. The comparison to the light rail projects, the difference is that those actually allowed a higher initial value and settlement delegated to the regional administrator. In discussing this with the real estate office, and Greg Ewig is, I believe, on the call as well, the feeling is really that we think the proposed value would be appropriate in terms of the council's continued participation in the completed purchase of these parcels, but that this as laid out here could provide a good streamlining of at least those initial offers, and for the vast majority of parcels that are of the lower value for acquisition.
Councilmember Chambliss.
Yes. Do you know kind of what the scale is with this being 159 potential parcels impacted for either purchase or demolition? How does that compare to other projects? And in terms of the Thrive analysis, what are the demographics looking like? Just so that I just want to make sure there's no surprises in terms of, you know, the communities that are impacted.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair and Council Member. So to the scale of the acquisitions, you know, as again, the vast majority of these are small sort of sidewalk reconstruction projects, and the good news in this case is that where the project is doing that work, they would not include local property. I'm trying. Sorry, the words escaping me. Where the property owner wouldn't be expected to contribute to the improvement. This would be compensating the property owner for the new infrastructure that the project would be constructing. Relative to the demographics, you know, this is a corridor, and certainly what's driving a lot of the pursuit of the Gold Line is to you know, increase the availability of high frequency and rapid transportation to the east side of St. Paul and the cities of Maplewood, Landfall, Oakdale, and Woodbury. So it does require some reconstruction, but we're also pursuing it without seeking for property owners to share in the burden of it. The major acquisitions that are included in the project are primarily commercial parcels. In each of these cases, we have a community engagement team that's been doing significant outreach work within the corridor, and as well as cultivating relationships directly, especially with the larger properties that we're looking that we may need to acquire, so that they're in the know and not surprised by these acquisitions as the offers are forthcoming, as well as just keeping them appraised of the overall progress for the Gold Line.
Sure, thanks.
All right, any additional questions, comments from council members? All right, if not, I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2020-311.
This is Fredson. I would move the staff recommendation.
Moved by Fredson. Is there a second? Second by Gonzalez. Is there any
Yes.
other discussion? Seeing and hearing none. Becky, could you call the roll?
Chambliss,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Ferguson,
Aye.
Fredson,
Aye.
Gonzalez,
Aye.
Sterner,
Aye.
Zirin,
Aye.
Barber.
Aye. With that, the motion carries. Thank you, Charles. With that, we are done with our business, and looking at the items, I would say that business items 1, 4, and 5 can go on consent. 2 would be non-consent, and 3 was tabled. Anyone have any disagreements with that? All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to our information items. The first information item is our mobile app update. We have Nick Yule.
Good evening, Madam Chair. Can everybody see my screen? I'm sharing the
Yes, we can.
slides. Oh, great.
Yep.
Good evening, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Nick Yule, and I'm the Senior Manager of Revenue Operations at Metro Transit. And I'm here today with Adam Mell, who's the Senior Marketing Development Specialist at Metro Transit. We're excited to be here tonight to update the committee on Metro Transit's mobile ticketing app and talk about the current process that we're right in the middle of to find the next provider for Metro Transit's mobile app. With over 4 years of experience with mobile ticketing now, we've learned a lot about what our customers want and expect from mobile ticketing. 4 years is a lifetime in the field of mobile technology, as you can imagine. And we know that advancements in mobile ticketing in the industry itself over that time frame will provide us significant opportunities in flexibility, security, and other key aspects of our next mobile app. In addition, we think the next mobile app will provide opportunities for us to better partner with our regional partners, especially in the space of mobile ticketing, and we're going to talk about that tonight. So first, I'm going to turn it over to Adam, and he's going to provide some background on our current mobile app and where we're at in the process.
Thank you very much. So some brief history on the Metro Transit mobile app. It was launched back in 2016 with that focus on mobile ticketing. Since then, we've learned that it is a valuable service for our riders, both for our special events riders and our regular customers. We see huge surges when there's big sporting events. The State Fair is another huge one. And you can see some things like the Super Bowl as well being great for visitors who come and want to ride Metro Transit as well. Year over year, we've seen exponential sales growth where, it started very small in 2016, but up until the pandemic hit and ridership sunk with everything else, it's been growing, again, nearly 50% month over month since its launch, which adds up to quite a bit. We did a major upgrade in March of this year, just right before the lockdowns began, unfortunately, but we have seen a lot of great response to the current version of the app. It's something that customers like as well. Again, that focus being on ease of ticketing and the ability for customers to pay fast and pay as they go with a digital or non-cash format. Next. So here you can see a quick overview of app revenues by month. Starting with 2017, we launched in November of 2016, so really not much data that would show for that. But again, with the black beginning in 2017, you can see already by 2018, a year later, extreme growth followed by 2019. And then, of course, 2020, we were doing really well up until, of course, COVID. Two highlights on there, one being the Super Bowl, which is yellow in February. That's 2018 as well. That was up until the State Fair of last year, our highest month to date. Then, of course, March this year, it dropped down, but you can see it's climbing back, mirroring what we see with our other metrics of ridership and go-to card sales and things like that. Next, please. So as we look forward to the next version of the mobile app, we really want to make sure that it's designed for flexibility for everyone. The RFP is in the process, as Nick mentioned. Hopefully we'll have a vendor selected in the next couple of weeks. But one of the things we're looking forward to now is to move along with what the industry is doing, which is allow Metro Transit tickets to be purchased through other apps using data feeds and APIs. This is something that is relatively new, but we're seeing more and more, and nearly every vendor offered a solution for this, and we're seeing it in other apps. So what this basically means is that you could be using a transportation app like Google Maps, or you could be using the Transit app, which is a popular third-party transit information app. And you could purchase your ticket for Metro Transit on either of those apps, and you would see the exact Metro Transit ticket. We would still have control over what the ticket looks like. It would be, for all intents and purposes, you're buying a ticket from Metro Transit. However, you're not leaving your app experience from your preferred app. So what we launched with mobile ticketing, we really did want to move to more of a do-it-all transit app that gives you trip planning and fancy bells and whistles like that. Those aren't totally off the table, but it seems like the way the industry is going is for the transit agencies to provide a ticket and a ticketing app, but also allow for other places to sell that ticket. Really what that means is, meeting the customer where they are. If they're using their preferred transit app for information, we don't want to make them have to have two apps. We want to have them use their preferred app, but still use our ticket and have the ability to use it as easily as possible. Can you go back one more time? One of the other things we'll talk about a little bit more too is we're looking to make this more regionally focused. As you can see in the slides we've shown so far, the ticket and the app are very Metro Transit branded. They look like Metro Transit vehicles. They have our colors. The app says Metro Transit on it. But this is a regional ticket, much like our go-to card or even a transfer that comes out of the fare box. It's not just valid on Metro Transit's routes. It's valid on the suburban providers like Minnesota Valley Transit and others like that. So because of that, as a part of that, we're looking into making this a much more regional ticket. We still see the Metro Transit app looking like our app, being our app, so customers have that known, trusted information. But the ticket will probably be somewhere more along the lines of the go-to card, which is more neutral, so that it's representing the go-to regional brand rather than saying this is Metro Transit and this is a Metro Transit ticket that you the MVTA customer are using. We know that the providers are interested in something like that. We've had them in this process of the RFP, helping us review proposals and helping us provide input on who we select as our final vendor. The idea here is, again, one ticket sold on many platforms. We know that a lot of these regional providers would like to have their own apps branded, present their own transit information, their own schedules in their way that they see fit. But then again, just like we were talking earlier about selling the ticket in Google Transit, or excuse me, Google Maps or the Transit app, you could buy that regional transit ticket in the MVTA app or the Anoka County map app, etc. Next, please.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. So as Adam mentioned, or maybe as I mentioned earlier, smartphones really have been revolutionary in terms of reducing barriers for implementing fare payment systems. Just a few years ago, if you can think about it, the only way an agency could accept fare payments was through a heavy equipment outlay, including fare boxes, ticket vending machines, and similar equipment. This equipment and these systems can cost millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, depending on the size of your agency and the size of your system. And while such systems are still needed, the advent of mobile ticketing really has resulted in increased flexibility and decreased cost for introduction of new payment technologies for transit agencies, big and small. But the reduction of barriers also requires stronger coordination between regional agencies and our partners. And this is something we've really learned over the last 4 years. The fare payment we have in the Twin Cities is really the envy of many regions, because a payment on one provider is really good across all of our providers, all throughout the Twin Cities. Customers don't need to have different fare payment methods or different regional partners, such as, say, MVTA or Southwest Transit. In fact, when the Super Saver magnetic cards were introduced in the 1980s and then the Go-To card in the early 2000s, customers knew they just needed one of those products to ride wherever transit would bring them in the Twin Cities at whatever time they wanted, with whichever provider was most convenient. And it was the same with mobile ticketing when we rolled that out 4 years ago. But with the advent of mobile ticketing and the low cost of acquiring a mobile ticketing app, now any regional provider can really not just have their own app, but have their own ticket within the app, provided it meets council standards. While the flexibility around the ticketing provides advantages to customers and providers alike, it also potentially introduces risk and confusion where there hasn't been any before. Instead of one mobile ticket, really throughout the region, we could end up with up to 5 mobile tickets if we don't, put some work into consolidating that and really creating one theme for which mobile ticketing will have for all of our customers and the providers. A little bit of background. Right now, Metro Transit currently reimburses all providers for rides taken on Go-To cards and mobile tickets, since right now we're collecting all of those funds. All payments or reloads or tickets purchased on those 2 payment platforms come to Metro Transit. The introduction of tickets administered by regional providers, if that were to happen, could complicate things, because now all of a sudden we have different tickets that are administered by different providers. And if one of those tickets is used on my system, now instead of just Metro Transit doing all of the reimbursement, we could have these different agencies reimbursing each other. And as you can imagine, that's going to introduce both cost as well as complexity and maybe even security concerns into this process. And there's also elements that we'll need to adjust for under that scenario, including fare inspections and overall ticket security. So with that, we also understand, to Adam's point, that regional providers such as Southwest and MVTA, for example, want to have their own apps and would like to provide opportunities for their customers to purchase their tickets in those apps, which they don't currently have. And, as Adam mentioned, they don't want to sell a ticket that looks just like a Metro Transit ticket that's heavily branded towards Metro Transit. But, as I mentioned, it's also important as a region that we keep that ticketing, purchasing, and use process simple for customers, and we keep the back-end processes around reimbursement, ticket security, and administration easy for everyone. So with that in mind, we really are excited about the opportunity the next version of mobile ticketing could provide in implementing what we're calling really that regional mobile ticket. We built the requirements into the app with that in mind, and we think the next mobile app will allow for providing a regional ticket that can be sold across all platforms and different apps and, really in a lot of different places. The idea is that we work with the regional providers and we develop a mobile ticket that really represents our region, not Metro Transit. This would be like we did with the Go-To card a number of years ago, which is not heavily Metro Transit branded, but was really designed so that customers associate the Go-To card, the whole system, with the region rather than a particular provider. Once that ticket is agreed upon, the ticket then becomes the standard design for the region's mobile ticket. It can be sold through Metro Transit's app, or it can be sold through another provider's app, even if the app provider is different than Metro Transit's. That really doesn't matter with the advent of technology and some of the, the software that allows for that. And that technology should be in place, across multiple providers. With this in mind, Metro Transit would still collect all the payments for the tickets sold through any app, or through any of those other providers, such as Transit app, that could sell our tickets. Since we're collecting all the payments, Metro Transit would still be the agency responsible for reimbursement to these other agencies, based on the actual reported ridership of those agencies, just like we do it today. The idea of a single ticket sold through multiple apps also ensures ticket security, since there's just one design for the entire region. And it also keeps it easy for all bus operators, customers, and fare inspectors throughout the region in knowing which ticket designs are good for travel without having to memorize, like I said, up to 5 different ticket designs and tracking the usage for those tickets separately. So with all of this in mind, we're making good progress on this project. We've whittled down the proposals that we received a little bit over a month ago to the top few. And we're meeting with those proposers now just to make sure that their proposals meet all of our needs. And we're asking a lot of questions just to ensure that. Once that's completed, we'll enter into final negotiations with the selected vendor, and we'll finalize the features for phase 1 rollout. We'll develop the ticket design, build a transition plan, and then work with our customers to make that transition as seamless as possible. And I just want to reinforce what Adam had indicated about this coordination we have with our regional partners so far. These groups have been involved in the earliest stages of this project, going way back to really the end of last year when we were developing requirements, and when we had brought in a few of the vendors that we were familiar with sort of a pre-proposal demo, so that we would have an understanding of what we should be looking at, sort of an RFI of sorts. And even today, we've reached out to those regional providers, and we've sent them our top proposers, those that have indicated they want to be involved, so that when we get their feedback, it's going to be an important part of the final selection process. So, Madam Chair, I thank you for your time, and Adam and I are happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Nick and Adam. Are there questions from council members?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I had just a quick one.
Councilmember Sterner.
Right, thank you so much. I just mentioned this is a technicality, but it says select new vendor. I'm just wondering, is the current vendor still in play as one of the keeping the account, or does it look like with the technology and the change that the current vendor is not going to be in play right now?
Madam Chair, council member, the current vendor, Movil, is still one of the proposals that we're looking at. So they're still very much in play at this point.
All right, any additional questions or comments? I just have a quick comment. I'm really excited to see this. It was a big deal when we did the mobile app to start off with, and it's been such a success. And I think that really looking at it from the way you are, from the broad regional perspective, is really the way to do it. And so really excited to see this roll up. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
We're on to our last information item then. We're going to have a conversation about Metro Transit mask compliance update. We have Bruce Howard and Chief Rizal here.
Yes, good afternoon again, Madam Chair. Bruce Howard, Director of Marketing and Transit Information, along with Chief Rizal from the Metro Transit Police Department. Okay, looks like Greg's going to share the presentation, which is great. So we're here to give you an update on the Masks Are a Must, which is a comprehensive mask enforcement campaign. And I will cover a few slides to provide some background, and then Chief will talk about the work that they're doing, and then I'll wrap it up with a little bit of an example of some of the new creative that we have out there. So next slide, Greg. The background here is that you can see a couple of key dates. May 15th, Metro Transit requires face coverings for all riders. So early on in the pandemic, there was some confusion about mask wearing. But since we cleared that up and we're following the guidance of the CDC and the Minnesota Department of Health, we quickly put that in place in May. And you see there before the state mandate began, which was July 25th. And since that time, we have had an extensive education campaign in place, including messages like you see on the top there of the bus on the destination signs, letting riders know that face coverings are required. We have stickers on all the buses and trains, information at metrotransit.org, been doing a lot of social media around that message, and then outreach from both Metro Transit police and staff. Next. So why an enhanced mask enforcement campaign, you might ask? Well, several reasons here. Of course, as everybody knows, COVID cases are rising, and you see the chart there of new COVID-19 cases in Minnesota by date. Don't think we need to spend any more time on that. Everyone's pretty familiar with what's happening. Safety fatigue. We've been hearing that some people have just, through these 8 or 9 months now, become quite fatigued with the safety rules, regulations. So we need to refresh and get that in front of them. And then we talked a little bit earlier here about compliance rates. And I think Brian Funk mentioned that on the bus side, we were in that 80 to 83% compliance, and on the light rail, 69%. And the chief is going to talk a little bit more about how we measure that. And then, as the general manager said, our goal here is to have 95% compliance. Next, Greg. So I just wanted to note here that staff has been out distributing masks in the last few months. We've distributed over 80,000 masks to customers. And in fact, we were out last Thursday at several sites, including Mall of America, the transit hubs at Signal Hills and Columbia Heights and Uptown. And so as the supplies are available, we've been doing what we can to get out and talk with customers and make sure that they have masks and understand the policy that we have in place. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chief. So next slide. Right.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, council members, Ed Frizzell, your Chief of Police. I'll try not to be duplicate a lot of information because you've received a lot in regards to the exploding nature of the pandemic and some of the directions that have come out of the governor's office, as well as the Department of Public Safety and the guidance that we've been given thus far. So with that being said, with the direction of the GM, MTPD embarked on a concentrated effort that included not only marketing, but creative services and our homeless action team and others to increase our mass compliance on our infrastructure and rolling stock. We are being very precise and deliberate about this because the nature of the pandemic insists that this airborne virus and masks go hand in hand. And I don't think at this point that is disputed. There's been new CDC guidance that emphasizes enforcement, which had a very direct effect on the amount of compliance for masks and mitigation and or lowering of the spread of this. So with that being said, and consistent with the governor's orders, as well as from the Department of Public Safety and modified CDC guidelines, we developed, again, consistent with those items, 4 steps. The first step, of course, is public education. You've seen there's quite a robust public information campaign out there. Everybody understands the why, and they're hearing it frequently out there. My officers are leading from the front by not only properly wearing their personal protective equipment, but showing others and educating them as to the why. That step 2 piece is provide a mask if necessary. Metro Transit, along with Brian Funk and crew, have been very, very consistent in supplying us with the needed number of masks. There's been thousands distributed thus far, and that is our first interaction past the public education piece, which provide them with a mask. It should be noted that many of the individuals that we observed had a mask or a face covering, but they were improperly wearing them around their neck and chin, and that became a part of the talking point, which is pull them up. Not only is it good for the public as well as yourself, but mandate it. Step 3 is if there is a consistent denial of or a resistance to wearing the mask, we're asking the rider to leave or exit the property or vehicle. We've had just some instances where sleepers or those seeking a shelter were startled and or did not have a mask, and we had to back off a little bit in order to de-escalate that situation. And again, start with the education, provide the mask, and so far so good in that regard, as I knock on wood. As a last resort, citation for chronic offenders. Other like-size agencies throughout the United States are doing that, although relatively in low numbers. But again, CDC and records have indicated that enforcement action does get you a higher compliance with this very critical task of wearing a mask. Next slide. So we've utilized on several different fronts, just not an overt enforcement, but leveraging not only technology, but some of the homeless action team and transit response unit directed patrols in regard to going out and looking for mask compliance. So by using this outreach and observation, again, we lead the region in the innovative use of our real-time information center and body-worn cameras, where I've directed my seasoned operators to work in conjunction with our CommStat or crimes, trends, patterns, and analysis individuals to determine the high-density portions throughout our systems, to include the day and the rush hour in the evening. And once identified those platforms and our locations, hone those cameras in on there with the specific purpose of looking for mask violations and or where we can intercede to increase the number of individuals at that location with wearing the mandated mask. So as you'll see in the next slide, where we've been able to come up with some data points in regards to those locations and times, and being able to apply the principles that you just seen earlier to include the public education and the data collection. Next slide. It should be noted that these measures are consistent with mandates, again, with the governor's orders, DPS law enforcement guidance, as well as the CD guidance. It includes utilizing this technology to develop the graphs as a snapshot, by example of identifying the MTPD mask enforcement in our week 1. So don't get confused by the numbers. Again, this was week 1 in which we started to pool our CommStat data along with our real-time information observations into what we were seeing into this type of graph. And as you can see, it's pretty straightforward, where when you look at the date in the number of compliance checks across the board, it's consistent with the 60 plus new Hitachi systems that's commonly referred to, where we're able to not only view those 60 plus trains, soon to be upwards of 90, but they can also observe this directly from the squad cars utilizing these. So pretty consistent board to board. We'll be able to track mass distribution, the warnings, as well as the checks. And this information will be provided to the GM at our command staff meetings, specifically geared toward COVID. Next slide. Okay, I went into a little bit of detail about the real-time information center. And as you can see, we get some pretty detailed information in regards to the time, day, location, again, based on density of what we were looking for, which is mass compliance on the green line and blue line, specifically for this slide as an example of the ways that we are going to measure our progress and establish base points to show progress toward our 95% goal. Next camera, excuse me, next slide.
Yep, and I think this is mine, Chief. So just to finish up here, Madam Chair, Council members, on the marketing communication sides, we're refreshing the messages that are out there. Here you see an example of one of the new posters that we have created that will be at the rail station. So our rail station kiosk poster. Masks are required on buses and trains, and we'll also be putting that up in several of the other transit station locations. We have a new onboard audio announcement that also corresponds to the efforts that the chief talked about with the enforcement. So the combination of both the audio and the work of Metro Transit Police, we think will be effective. Onboard scrolling readers, we're going to be using those, of course, continuing to use our social media And then we're actually going to be doing some online ads and some Google paid search ads geo-targeting specific areas where we are seeing compliance down and customer complaints up. So that might be some specific hotspots that we've been looking at on routes 10, 17, 21, and so on. We're also going to be translating many of these media assets into different languages and placed in the appropriate outlets. So with that, I think we would be available for any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from council members? All right, I'm not seeing any. I would thank you guys for this presentation. I'm glad that we're being proactive and being out in the community and especially making sure we have masks available to hand out if needed. So we really appreciate your efforts in this. So, all right, check one more time. Any other comments from any other council members? All right. With that concludes our business for the evening. If there's no objections, then we can be adjourned.